Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The seemingly stable world of the Craig family from Colorado took an unexpected and devastating turn in March 2023, amid the everyday routines of family life. Once seen as the epitome of stability, their marriage and careers started to fall apart as long-kept secrets and a lack of trust came to light. New information created even more questions as friends and family tried to make sense of the situation. What actually transpired in this seemingly ideal family behind closed doors? On March 15, 2023, at approximately 11 a.m., Angela Craig was taken to the hospital due to severe headaches, nausea, and dizziness. She was admitted to the hospital for the third time in 10 days, but this time the circumstances were much more concerning. In an attempt to stabilize her condition, which was rapidly declining, medical personnel put her on life support. Her family, including her husband James, was in disbelief at how quickly and abruptly her health had deteriorated. Angela was born in Dodge City on April 15, 1975, and from a young age she had played a significant role in her family and community. Despite having allergies, she grew up in a big family with 10 siblings and fell in love with animals. Her hobbies included woodworking and reading, and both friends and acquaintances were won over by her easygoing demeanor and charisma. Angela was a successful interior designer who was well known for her cozy and welcoming designs. She also loved genealogy and helped people find long-lost family members. James Craig, who went on to become a dentist, married Angela on December 18, 1999. After earning his degree from the University of Missouri-Kansas City in 2006, James started participating in dental programs abroad. They established a life together in Colorado, where James opened an Aurora dental office. Despite her hectic schedule, Angela remained close to her siblings, especially her sister Toni, with whom she spoke on a daily basis. The couple had 6 children together. Angela's life appeared to be ideal. She oversaw a choir, ran youth programs, and was very active in church activities. But everyone was taken aback by her unexpected health problems in March 2023. She had complained of a headache only a week before, but the symptoms had gone away quickly, so there was no reason to be concerned. The doctors and her family were unable to explain why her condition was now getting worse so quickly. James, meanwhile, stayed by her side, as always attentive and considerate. 2 p.m., Angela experienced a severe episode that same day, leaving her loved ones feeling scared and powerless. The cause of her condition was still unknown despite the medical team's tireless efforts to save her, which increased the already existing stress and anxiety. Doctors put in endless effort to stabilize Angela after she lost consciousness, but things got out of hand. Her stroke on March 15, 2023, was a pivotal moment in her life. She was already in a serious condition when they got to the hospital, according to her brother, who had driven her there that day. Her symptoms, which included severe nausea, excruciating stomach pain, and dizziness, had gotten worse. She had visited a hospital 3 times in 10 days, but this time the situation seemed to be very serious. Just 1 day after returning from a trip to see her sister Toni in Utah, Angela was admitted to the hospital for the first time on March 6. Her symptoms were considered minor by the doctors at the time, and following an evaluation, she was released. But on March 9, she went to the doctor once more. James, her husband, a longtime dentist with years of experience who had always been there to support her through tough times, was very worried. He turned to the wife of his doctorate-holding colleague and friend, Ryan Redfern, for advice. Ryan and his spouse continued to be involved in the days that followed, keeping tabs on Angela's health. They suggested more tests and consultations, offered their support, and shared their knowledge of possible causes of her symptoms. James shared test results and updates with them on a regular basis. MRIs, ultrasounds, blood tests, and CT scans of different body parts were among the tests that were performed on Angela. All of the results were within normal ranges in spite of these efforts. Despite receiving intravenous fluid therapy, Angela's abnormally low blood pressure remained the only consistent anomaly. James realized how serious the situation was by the time Angela had a stroke on March 15th. He sent Ryan's wife pictures from the hospital room as he broke the heartbreaking news. The pictures showed Angela surrounded by medical equipment while being watched closely by a group of experts. Even so, The doctors were unable to come up with a conclusive diagnosis, which left everyone feeling overwhelmed and powerless. A desperate phone call on the morning of March 15 would make James even more anxious. Angela's brother told him that her condition had drastically worsened and that he was taking her to the hospital. James was treating patients at his clinic at the time. He left as soon as he heard the news to be with her. Desperate for answers, James decided to speak with Ryan's wife once more, after realizing that the traditional diagnostic techniques were not working. The events leading up to March 15, 2023, were tense and unnerving because Angela's health was continuing to deteriorate at an alarming rate. Angela was admitted to the hospital for the second time on March 9 and was monitored overnight. Doctors hoped she would get better, but they couldn't figure out what was causing her symptoms. Even though the test results were always normal, the growing anxiety among her family and the medical staff was concerning. Despite all of these changes, Ryan and his spouse remained influential. James's longtime friend and financial partner Ryan had previously helped him through difficult times, including rescuing James's dental practice in 2021 during a financial crisis. Their help was equally important this time, since Angela's life now depended on it, and the cause of her pain was still unknown. At James's dental clinic, Caitlin, the new office manager, couldn't get rid of the feeling that something strange was going on with her boss. After multiple incidents in the days preceding March 15, when Angela's condition deteriorated to a critical level, her suspicions started to grow. After speaking with James's close friend Ryan, she was able to piece together her observations and uncover an unsettling pattern. Everything began on March 6. Caitlin was working late that night when James showed up at the clinic out of the blue. He had no appointments with patients, and his actions appeared unusual. James went into one of the exam rooms and used the computer there rather than using his office computer. Although Caitlin thought this was strange, she didn't give it much thought at the time. On March 13, a package reached the clinic a few days later. James had made it clear that Caitlin was to accept it herself and that no one else was to open it, but when she went to pick up the delivery, she found that the box had already been opened by another employee. A cylindrical container bearing the warning label "hazardous materials" and the words "potassium cyanide" was found inside. Startled, but aware of James's instructions regarding confidentiality, Caitlin promptly resealed the package and gave it to him without question. She witnessed James carrying the brown paper-wrapped container out of the office later that day. Her suspicions were strengthened by this incident. She looked into potassium cyanide because she was becoming increasingly uneasy, and what she discovered was terrifying. The dizziness, nausea, and low blood pressure that Angela had been experiencing for days closely matched the symptoms of exposure. Angela was in critical condition by the time Ryan and his wife got to the hospital to help James. Ryan was surprised when Caitlin told him about the odd things that happened at the clinic, even though he was already aware of some of the family struggles. He was so horrified by her story that he called the police and told them what she had told him while he was on his way to the hospital. Nevertheless, Caitlin observed other peculiar actions from James. She remembered something else. As she was leaving the office on the evening of March 6, James texted her to ask her to personally make sure that a package that was scheduled to arrive was delivered to her. This request appeared to be merely a formality at the time, but in the context of later events, it became more significant. Ryan made the decision to speak with James when he got to the hospital. James asserted that Angela had requested the order for the aforementioned chemical, potassium cyanide, but his explanation sounded tentative, which made Ryan even more suspicious. Ryan shared this information with investigators out of concern, and they started to suspect that this case was much more complicated than it first seemed. Angela was taken to the hospital once more on March 15. Her symptoms, which included sharp abdominal pain, nausea, and extreme dizziness, had gotten critically worse. By the time police arrived, Angela could hardly stand, according to her brother, who had driven her to the emergency room. James now appeared to be aware that things were rapidly getting out of his control. James was questioned by police later that day. Investigators focused on a crucial question even before the official interview began. How would James explain the link between his purchase of potassium cyanide and Angela's abrupt and serious health decline? Interviews with the hospital's medical staff, where Angela was receiving treatment, marked the start of the investigation. Ryan's worries alerted a nurse, who confirmed that Angela's test results revealed odd markers, or symptoms, which include seizures and rapid deterioration, may be consistent with exposure to a toxic substance, according to her attending physician. Investigators turned their attention to the circumstances surrounding Angela's hospitalization as a result of these statements, which turned into crucial pieces of evidence. Detectives went to James's dental clinic the next day. The office manager, Caitlin, made a number of observations that added to the mystery. She remembered James talking about looking after Angela and making her a protein shake on March 6. Angela's health started to deteriorate shortly after, which was a coincidence that investigators noticed and led to further inquiries. In the days that followed, Caitlin added, James frequently seemed nervous, shunned social interactions, and talked on the phone a lot. She was especially drawn to his request that she sign documents pertaining to the purchase of clinic equipment. Investigators suspected possible financial misconduct after examining these documents and finding that the amounts listed were significantly greater than the equipment's true cost. James regularly used the office computer for personal purposes, according to one of the clinic staff members. The employee remembered in February that James had visited a website about chemical reagents that contained references to potentially very dangerous substances. These findings were consistent with the identification of James's potassium cyanide purchase. James's financial activities were soon the subject of the investigation. Investigators discovered that James had sent a sizable amount of money to an unidentified supplier connected to the sale of chemicals on March 4. James was able to conceal the order from his family because it had been shipped to the clinic's address. Investigators linked the package Caitlin had seen to the delivery when they tracked it down. She explained the warning-labeled container and mentioned that James had retrieved it and taken it home. The focus soon shifted to James's clinic office. James has been locking his office door during lunch breaks, which is not something he usually does, according to another employee. Investigators discovered traces of packaging materials that seemed to match the delivery of the potassium cyanide while searching the office. Hospital personnel persisted in trying to save Angela's life in the interim. Doctors ruled out accidental poisoning because of the high levels of toxic substances in her system. The foundation for additional accusations against James was established by this crucial detail. In the hopes of discovering more evidence connecting James to Angela's declining health, detectives secured warrants to search James's house and car. In her additional testimony, Caitlin noted that Angela's symptoms were consistent with those of potassium cyanide poisoning, which include nausea, vomiting, and low blood pressure. She added that even in tiny doses the chemical could be fatal. Investigators' suspicions grew stronger with each new piece of evidence, which led them to believe that intentional actions caused Angela's health crisis. James's computer was examined as part of the inquiry. Detectives discovered notes on it that listed the times and dates that Angela's symptoms worsened. The nature of the record suggested that James may have been using them to track and control her condition, even though the entries seemed to document her health problems. Further information was uncovered by looking through the couple's messages. Angela thanked James via text on March 6, 2023 for making her coffee. She reported feeling weak and lightheaded shortly after. In response, James advised her to take her blood pressure. During the same conversation later that day, James mentioned strong medications and blamed her symptoms on possible triggers, which investigators later saw as an effort to avoid suspicion. James' longtime friend and business partner Ryan revealed that James had confided in him about significant marital and financial difficulties in 2021. James was even thinking about getting a divorce at the time. James subsequently stated that Angela had been experiencing extreme depression and related an instance in which he allegedly prevented her from hurting herself. Their 6 children's testimonies, however, ran counter to these assertions. They characterized Angela as a lively, upbeat individual who displayed no symptoms of depression or odd conduct. Investigators also investigated James's divorce demand. In December 2022, he had mentioned Angela's mental health in conversations, but he did nothing to get her professional help. James's habit of hiding important information and this inconsistency increased suspicions that his actions might have been a part of a premeditated scheme. Additional evidence was found during the search of James's house and car. Investigators discovered pieces of packaging thought to be connected to the cyanide delivery in his home office. Traces of a powdery substance were found in his car and sent for examination. As the evidence grew, investigators were able to concentrate on James's possible double life. Even though he presented himself as a loving family man, he was starting to show signs of secretive behavior and hidden problems. A clearer picture of what might have been going on behind the scenes was emerging from the financial difficulties, marital strife, and thorough notes about Angela's symptoms. One of the most important aspects of the investigation was the history of James and Angela's marriage. According to Angela's sister, Angela had often confided in her about feeling pressured and manipulated by James. According to her, he could talk about his issues for hours on end without taking responsibility or demonstrating any desire to change. According to reports, Angela felt stuck in the circumstance and lacked the strength to escape. These reports corroborated remarks made by James's co-workers, who observed his repeated grievances regarding family issues. James once remarked that life would be simpler without all of these responsibilities, according to one co-worker. Throughout the investigation, Angela's medical records were extremely important. She had seen doctors more often than usual over the previous 2 years, complaining of inexplicable symptoms like weakness, dizziness, and stomach pain. Investigators suspected a potential link between her health problems and James's behavior, because these visits fell during times when their relationship was more tense. James's search history showed meticulous preparation. He had studied the uses of toxic substances, such as cyanide and arsenic, and discovered ways to cover up their taste in food and beverages. Articles about avoiding suspicion in poisoning cases also piqued his interest. This digital trail demonstrated a high degree of intentionality and preparation. The situation was further clarified by financial records. Investigators discovered that James had been paying for a mailbox he rented in a far-off location, which he used to accept some deliveries. According to delivery service staff, James regularly picked up packages, usually in the evening. His cyanide purchase, which was already being investigated, coincided with one of these deliveries. Additional leads were obtained through interviews with Angela's friends. According to one friend, Angela had complained of odd symptoms weeks prior to being admitted to the hospital, and she had expressed concern that they might have been caused by something she had eaten or consumed. Nevertheless, she ruled out James's involvement, blaming her illness on fatigue or other medical conditions. Investigators sought the opinion of toxicologists, who tested Angela's hair in order to shed light on the matter. Traces of arsenic and other harmful substances were found during the analysis, suggesting that the person had been exposed to poisons for a long time. These results clearly indicated that Angela's declining health was not a coincidence. A coherent story started to emerge from the gathered evidence, which included witness accounts, financial transactions, and the outcomes of medical tests. Long before Angela was admitted to the hospital, James had not only carefully planned his course of action, but had also started carrying it out. Nevertheless, investigators persisted in their efforts to dispel any remaining uncertainties. Investigators also looked into James's financial circumstances and found some concerning information. With more than $2 million in debt, his dental practice was in terrible shape. This was made worse by his gambling habit. James's financial situation was already unstable because he had lost a significant sum of money in Las Vegas. These disclosures provided a fresh viewpoint on James and Angela's marital problems, which, in the words of Angela's sister, had been anything but ideal for years. According to Angela's sister, James had consistently persuaded her to stay in the marriage, despite her attempts to leave it for 16 years. Those close to her claimed that despite feeling emotionally spent and stuck, Angela lacked the willpower to break up with him. Investigators suspected James of employing manipulation techniques to keep control of the situation as a result of these accounts. Another aspect of James's life was illuminated by emails discovered during the investigation. An intimate relationship that started in 2022, when Karen, a Texas orthodontist, filed for divorce, was disclosed in correspondence with her. Investigators were drawn to one specific detail. James had purchased airline tickets for Karen on the same day he was issued an arsenic order. Karen apologized for not being with James in an email on March 16 and said she hoped to see him soon. Investigators looked into life insurance plans that were obtained in Angela's name in the interim. They found 3 policies that paid out a significant sum of money. This discovery heightened concerns that James might have included money in his purported scheme. At 4:29 p.m. on March 18, medical professionals pronounced Angela clinically dead. James was charged with first-degree intentional homicide a few hours later. Investigators claim that on March 6, 2023, James, who regularly made protein shakes for his wife, tried to put arsenic in her beverage. After that failed, he told the supplier that he needed potassium cyanide for a medical procedure and ordered an expedited shipment. James was arrested the next day. He was charged with several offenses, including tampering with evidence, at his first court appearance. The judge imposed a $10 million bail amount. Prosecutors charged James Craig with solicitation of murder and solicitation of perjury shortly after. An Aurora police detective was the alleged victim, according to Aurora police spokesperson Joe Moylan, even though the indictment didn't say who James was supposed to hurt. The trial of James Craig has been postponed indefinitely. Craig is scheduled to appear in court with a new lawyer after entering a not guilty plea. Craig was also accused of surreptitiously delivering a jail letter to a fellow prisoner who was freed on bond with the help of an adult daughter. The letter, according to the prosecution, included a request to produce a fictitious video that allegedly showed Angela Craig requesting that James get her some toxic substances. Angela's family made the decision to donate her organs after she passed away on March 18. Knowing that her life could save others gave her loved ones some small comfort in this choice. Her family wrote her obituary, which omitted the terrible circumstances of her death and instead highlighted her generosity, love for her family, and commitment to helping those around her. Angela's 6 children were thrown into the middle of these terrible circumstances in the meantime. Angela's family took custody of them after James was arrested in an effort to protect them from the consequences of his alleged behavior. During this trying time, Angela's family put in a lot of effort to make sure the kids got the help and attention they required. The dark secrets that James Craig had meticulously hid behind the facade of a prosperous career and an apparently contented family life were exposed by this case. The tragic result of his painstakingly planned actions devastated not only his own life, but also the lives of his loved ones, family, and children. This story is a sobering reminder that appearances of success and stability can conceal deep conflicts and hidden agendas, leaving many lives forever altered and many questions unanswered. And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments what part of this story shocked you the most. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. A terrifying discovery broke the quiet of a comfortable Goshen home on the evening of February 6, 2015. Respected policeman Daniel Green was discovered dead in his own restroom. 1 bullet to the forehead, 4 shots. The shots went unheard. Nobody noticed anything unusual, and there were no hints that would identify the offender. This was no coincidence. It all appeared to have been done with cold, deliberate precision. An officer had devoted his entire career to serving the community. Who could have killed him? Nobody close to him could have predicted how complicated and sinister the answers would be. In the tiny town of Goshen, encircled by orchards, the silence of the deserted house was suddenly broken. A dead man lay flat on his back on the bathroom floor. On February 6, 2015, at precisely noon, Daniel Green, a well-respected police officer, was discovered. His co-workers went to Daniel's house because they were worried that he hadn't arrived for work. They were completely shocked by what they discovered there. The 31-year-old officer was killed by 4 bullets, one of which hit his forehead. Nothing had been heard by any of the neighbors. No one had contacted the police, and there was not a single clue that identified the offender. No weapon or DNA evidence was found. The criminal left behind nothing but emptiness, as if they knew exactly what they were doing. Daniel Green had spent his whole life in Goshen. The people of the town held him in high regard during his 11 years of service with the California Police Department. He always sought to make a positive impact on the community and loved his work. His life ended so suddenly and brutally in this place, which was like a fortress in a quiet corner where everyone knew and trusted one another. As soon as the police started their investigation, they turned their attention to Daniel's private life. Following his divorce from 27-year-old Erica Sandoval, he had been living alone. It was not an easy relationship with her. Daniel's friends and co-workers were aware that Erica had not let him go and was still meddling in his affairs, even after they had split up. Despite their formal separation, she frequently attempted to manipulate him. Almost instantly after receiving a message from a friend, Erica showed up at the scene on February 6, 2015. In front of the officers, she sobbed uncontrollably as she entered the house, claiming she had nothing to do with what had happened and that she hadn't seen Daniel that day. But the investigators were suspicious of her actions. There were too many unresolved questions, she reacted too emotionally, and she got to the scene too soon. The Tulare County Sheriff's Department was rocked by Officer Green's death. His co-workers started to question whether his untimely death had anything to do with his work or if it was a personal matter. One thing was certain: despite the growing number of questions, these mysteries needed to be resolved as quickly as possible. Motives, relationships, personal disputes. Investigators put in endless effort, step by step, to find the truth, looking everywhere. Daniel's twin brother and sister, Matthew and Misty, were devastated by his passing. The twin brothers had grown up together in Porterville, a small Californian town, where they had known early on that they wanted to work in law enforcement. Matthew chose to pursue a career in law after starting out in the police force. In contrast, Daniel remained in the force, becoming an officer and taking pride in his career choice. Their sister was proud of her brothers and was always there for them. Daniel Green was well known for his love of motorcycles, in addition to his work as a police officer. He enjoyed the feeling of speed and freedom while he was a member of a motorcycle club. Daniel had a special bond with James Bonds Downey, one of his closest friends. Both of them loved riding their bikes through the countryside, relishing the freedom they felt on the road. Daniel had a busy personal life. He was rarely by himself and loved going on dates. For a while, he would bring a new girlfriend to family get-togethers every month. This went on until he met 22-year-old nurse Erica Sandoval in late 2009. Everything changed for him when he met Erica. He made the decision to settle down after falling deeply in love. He was still single at that point, but his sister and brother were already married. But things were different with Erica. She captured Daniel's heart. According to Erica's close friend Angelica Ramirez, Erica was incredibly infatuated with Daniel at the start of their relationship. They appeared to be the ideal couple at first glance, and their passion was strong. But as Daniel's sister remembered, even though Erica was friendly, she could lose her temper easily if something didn't go her way. Tension in their relationship increased over time, leading to frequent disputes and arguments. Born into a middle-class family in Southern California, Erica Sandoval grew up there. David Sandoval, her brother, recalled how Erica always felt special as the only daughter. Her parents tried to give her the best of everything and spoiled her. She grew up expecting her wishes to be granted without question and never faced hardship or mistreatment. Due to her parents' and brother's unwavering support and attention, Erica developed a sense of entitlement and the conviction that she should be given preferential treatment. Everyone close to Daniel Green and Erica Sandoval was caught off guard when they learned of their covert Las Vegas wedding. When they made the decision to get married without telling anyone beforehand, Daniel was 26 and Erica was 23. When Daniel's brother and sister got a late-night message with a picture of the marriage certificate, they were astounded. A few weeks later, Daniel wore a black suit and Erica wore a white dress, and the newlyweds threw a small wedding celebration for their loved ones. But even though they seemed content, Daniel and Erica's relationship was anything but ideal. Daniel's friend and fellow motorcycle rider Herb Adams recalled how Daniel once told him that they had a fight even before they were married, and Erica took a razor and cut the furniture in his house. According to Herb, it was a concerning indication that shouldn't have been disregarded. Daniel's brother Matthew saw the damage firsthand and expressed concern, but Daniel maintained that it was only an emotional outburst. Within the family, the disputes persisted. One of these incidents occurred during a dispute between Matthew and Daniel's sister. Erica shouted at Daniel as she grabbed him. Daniel's brother and sister heard him sob in the adjacent room. It was one of the most agonizing times in Matthew's life, he recalled. Hearing his brother weep broke his heart. However, it was challenging to get involved in Daniel and Erica's relationship. The Green family had a difficult upbringing. Daniel's mother, brother, and sister recalled the harsh treatment they received from their stepfather. He frequently drank excessively, used illegal substances, and had a criminal history. Being older than their sister, Matthew and Daniel frequently took the brunt of the abuse in order to keep her safe. Their stepfather died shortly after their mother finally obtained a restraining order. They were all affected by these incidents. There were concerning similarities between Daniel's relationship with Erica and his early years. Family members observed that Erica verbally denigrated her husband, kept him away from friends and family, and controlled him. Even though Daniel works as a police officer and regularly deals with victims of domestic abuse, he was unable to acknowledge that he had experienced a similar circumstance. He was aware that he was turning into a victim, but there was nothing he could do about it. He was hampered by his fear, shame, and unwillingness to admit his vulnerability. For the same reasons that women do, men frequently fail to report domestic violence. In February 2011, Daniel and Erica's marital problems peaked. Daniel's neighbor overheard the couple getting into a heated argument. In an attempt to push her husband over the edge, Erica was shouting and making fun of him. Knowing that losing control could cost him his career, Daniel made an effort to maintain his composure. He once requested that the neighbor contact emergency services in order to put an end to the situation. Despite the gravity of the incident, Daniel declined to file charges against Erica, so she was quickly freed after the police took her into custody. Daniel concluded that their relationship was over after this incident became irreparable. Only a year after their formal marriage, they got divorced and separated in January 2012. Erica revealed to her friends that she was expecting Daniel's child a few months after the divorce. Daniel was informed promptly, and in spite of everything they had experienced, he made the decision to try to start over for the benefit of the unborn child. They moved back in together and resumed their relationship. The family of Daniel hoped that this time would be different, and that their arguments would no longer be a problem. Daniel eagerly awaited the baby's birth and did everything he could to keep the peace at home. Nevertheless, the issues persisted. Erica frequently bemoaned Daniel's severe demeanor to her friend Angelica Ramirez. She said she was unhappy in the relationship with Daniel and that he could be cold and uncaring. Angelica remembered that Erica used to claim that Daniel had tried to strangle her by grabbing her by the neck. One day, she feared it might end tragically. Although she was aware of her limited influence, Angelica made an effort to assist Erica. Daniel's friends and family discussed Erica's violent behavior at the same time. She demonstrated uncontrollable behavior by damaging Daniel's property by slashing couches and mattresses. Month after month, the disputes intensified, but neither side asked for assistance. Tension only increased and their relationship remained precarious. Despite their best efforts to keep the family together, Daniel and Erica were always at odds. Friends and family saw that their relationship was becoming more and more like a vicious cycle, where both parties suffered but neither dared to break free. Their story turned into a string of accusations and suffering because neither of them wanted to ask for help. Erica gave birth to a son on January 5, 2013, and they named him Aiden. Their relationship appeared to be finally getting better at that point. Daniel felt his life had a new purpose and was overjoyed to become a father. He made the decision to sell his motorcycle for the benefit of his family, realizing that their security and welfare came first. Though it was difficult for him, he made this choice for Aiden's sake and their family's stability. Daniel shared images of himself and his son on social media. These were the happy times in his life. But after only 6 months, tensions began to rise once more. Arguments and ongoing disputes increased in frequency. Erica accepted Daniel's suggestion to move out, but she took Aiden with her and severed all communication with her ex-husband. Daniel became depressed after being unable to see his son. He made the decision to battle for custody of Aiden, which sparked a heated argument between them. These things happened in the context of another incident that had a big impact on Daniel's life. Daniel's brakes abruptly failed while riding a motorcycle with a friend just before Aiden was born. Daniel found that some wires had been cut when they pulled over. He thought Erica might have been the culprit right away. He confronted her head-on when he got home, but Erica denied everything. Never would she do anything that would endanger his life, she insisted. In an effort to deflect attention and prevent future confrontations, Daniel decided not to call the police or tell anyone about the incident. Erica was adamantly against Daniel's love of motorcycles. They were dangerous in her opinion. They quarreled each time he came back from a ride, and their relationship only became more tense. Following the incident with the cut brakes, the motorcycle's disputes peaked. In an attempt to maintain control and lessen the consequences, Daniel chose to keep quiet even though he knew their relationship was becoming toxic. Daniel thought that his family would enter a more tranquil phase after selling the motorcycle and having his son, but the arguments persisted. Daniel was thoroughly shaken by an incident that happened in the fall of 2014 while he and Erica were spending another night together. When he awoke in the middle of the night, Erica was standing over him brandishing a gun. She pointed it at him and claimed to have had a nightmare about Daniel cheating on her. She expressed her desire to take his life in order to relieve herself of that suffering. By telling her that it was only a dream and that he had never betrayed her, Daniel was able to calm her down. Erica lowered the gun and appeared to relax. Daniel came to the realization that their relationship had become risky after this. After sharing the incident with his friends, he made the decision to permanently break off the toxic relationship. They reconnected in January 2015 to commemorate their son Aiden's second birthday in spite of this incident. Everyone saw Daniel and Erica chatting lovingly at the family get-together for close relatives. Many believed they were back together, after Daniel even gave her a cheek kiss. Daniel, however, was aware that they could not have a future together and did not wish to resume their previous disputes and arguments. Following that encounter, Daniel announced to his friends that he had a new girlfriend, Brenda Vela, who was 20 years old. He shared the good news on social media with a picture of the two of them. Many believed that he was finally starting a new, more tranquil chapter in his life because he appeared to be truly happy. However, a tragic incident soon followed. As agreed upon, Daniel dropped Aiden off at Erica's house early on February 6, 2015. He then proceeded to the gym. When he got home from his workout, his life abruptly ended. After entering the restroom and taking a seat, Daniel was shot 4 times, in the forehead, neck, chest, and arm. He had no time to defend himself before he was killed. Their relationship had always been characterized by animosity and accusations directed at one another. They were consistently aggressive in their text messages. There were insults and rage in hundreds of messages. Daniel claimed that Erica was attempting to take away his son, which was the thing he valued most. In response, Erica accused him of being a bad father and selfish. They argued about everything from personal attacks to parenting concerns. The tension only increased because there was no fruitful discussion. Then, however, there was a surprising reconciliation. Why they began spending time together again was a mystery to their friends and family. At first glance, it seemed like they were reestablishing their relationship. It appeared that they had achieved some harmony and that the arguments had stopped. However, as we all know, this tranquility was short-lived, and things quickly returned to normal. The day following Daniel's passing, Erica was taken in for interrogation. She said she had nothing to do with what had happened and hadn't visited his house in weeks. She was told by investigators that they had video from a nearby home security camera that showed her entering the house on the day of the crime. The investigators chose to use this strategy to make Erica panic, even though her identification from the video was actually inconclusive. This tactic was successful. Erica confessed because she was unable to cope with the pressure. She even indicated the location where she had thrown away the gun that was used in the crime. The prosecutor contended that jealousy and the sense of being supplanted by a different woman were the driving forces behind the crime. A note containing Brenda's name and birth year was discovered in Erica's purse when she was taken into custody, suggesting that she had been following Daniel's new girlfriend. Despite the strong evidence against her, the trial didn't begin until October 1, 2019, which was 5 years after the terrible incident. In an attempt to get back in touch with Daniel, Erica called him roughly 170 times in the days before the crime. She had heard that Brenda was spending time with their son Aiden, whom Daniel had introduced to her. She had been pushed over the edge by this. The prosecutor added that Erica erased a number of Daniel's phone messages following the crime. She tried to persuade Daniel that she would improve and change in these messages. Daniel, however, had replied that he planned to move on and didn't want to interact with her anymore. Erica's lawyer maintained throughout the trial that Daniel had been an abusive husband who routinely attacked her. They played audio recordings of heated arguments during which Daniel was heard threatening and insulting Erica. These recordings, which showed cruelty and aggression in their relationship, were an essential component of her defense. Speaking in court, Erica detailed the various abuse incidents she had experienced over the years. She said Daniel had threatened her, grabbed her by the neck, and physically abused her. According to Erica, she lived in continual fear and decided not to call the police because she believed it would be pointless. She claimed that because Daniel was a police officer, he had the ability to sway any investigation and was too strong for her to demand justice. Since Daniel was a respected member of the community, Erica thought no one would believe her. Erica said she had a phone conversation with Daniel on February 5, 2015, the day before the crime. She claimed that she had hope of rekindling their relationship because they were flirting with one another. She made the decision to visit his home the following day to see if they could get back in touch. She was instantly uneasy when she walked inside and saw 2 guns on the table. Erica made the decision to take a closer look around the house and discovered a partially open safe in one of the rooms. She discovered 2 private images of what she believed to be minors inside. She was taken aback by this and began to worry that Daniel might endanger their son. According to Erica, looking at those pictures altered her opinion of Daniel. She realized that his interests might be far more sinister than she had initially believed when she recalled how he had forced her to wear school uniforms. Erica put the papers back and then heard a car arrive. Daniel was the one. Unsure of what to do, she snatched up both loaded guns in a panic and fled into one of the rooms. Daniel went through the rooms when he first arrived at the house. Erica heard him take the guns in her hands and go to the bathroom. She was so terrified that she followed him. Daniel was seated on the toilet when she walked into the bathroom. When he saw her, he yelled in a threatening tone. She claims that's when she started shooting. She continued shooting until she thought the threat had passed, though she couldn't recall how many shots she had fired. She then threw the weapons away, ran out of the house, and attempted to escape. In addition, Erica acknowledged that she kept having sex with Daniel in spite of all the abuse because she was afraid of how he would respond to her rejection. She asserted that he would turn hostile if she didn't appease him. She stayed with him in part because of this. She was afraid of what might happen if she tried to resist his demands or refused to comply. She believed that obeying his wishes was directly related to her safety. During the trial, Erica first brought up the pictures she had discovered in Daniel's safe. She claimed that because she didn't trust the authorities and thought they would support her ex-husband, she had purposefully kept quiet about it during the investigation. Daniel's family members were appalled by these allegations and flatly denied their veracity. Erica maintained that she was afraid her words would be misunderstood or disregarded. Erica's assertions were unsupported, though. When the police searched Daniel's house, they didn't find any illegal images or proof to back up her claims. According to the prosecutor, Erica lied about everything she said in order to escape punishment. Erica's lawyer attempted to paint Daniel in a bad light by pointing out that hundreds of private images and videos of adults were on his computer and phone. The lawyer also pointed out that more than 1,000 pictures had been removed from Daniel's phone years prior, which he believed might reveal sinister secrets. Perhaps Erica had good reason to be afraid of him. Erica apologized to Daniel's family and said she was sorry for what she had done. She claimed that her actions were motivated by panic and fear for her son, and that she never intended for things to end so tragically. Additionally, Erica's lawyer contended that Daniel himself was equally responsible for Daniel's death as Erica. Both of them were unable to break free from the traumatic relationship they were in, and it appeared that their fate was doomed to end tragically. A mistrial resulted from the jury's inability to reach a unanimous verdict after nearly 4 days of deliberation. Since it gave them a chance to review the case and create a fresh defense plan, Erica's lawyer saw this as a success. In spite of this, Daniel's brother Matthew Green and his wife adopted Aiden, and Erica lost her parental rights. A new trial was planned for 2020, but the pandemic caused it to be repeatedly postponed. Although a final decision has not yet been made, the most recent hearing was held in December 2022. As of right now, Erica Sanville is being held pending trial. If convicted, she could be executed. The next stage of the trial, which could be pivotal in this intricate case, is still being prepared for by the lawyers on both sides. Many people learned from this tragedy, which served as a reminder of the extent to which personal demons and jealousy can lead if assistance is not sought, and toxic relationships are not ended promptly. Too many lives were lost, too much suffering was endured, and too many words remained unsaid. Nevertheless, Despite this gloom, some people persisted in fighting for a better future and made every effort to ensure little Aiden's happiness. Even though the story is over, its reverberations will last for a very long time, serving as a constant reminder of what can occasionally be concealed behind the closed doors of homes that appear to be ideal. And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments what part of this story shocked you the most. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. Despite the busy city streets and crowded malls, Lois Pearson always favored the quiet solitude of her childhood home, a modest wooden house tucked away among verdant hills. Lois rarely left her ancestral home, where her family had resided since her birth in 1949. Leasing her land to a man who used it to graze his cattle allowed her to live on a meager income. Lois became more dependent on her own resources following the death of her mother. She chose to use water from a well instead of running water when her pipes froze a few years ago. She carried a single lamp from room to room on a long cord for her everyday activities. Lois went to church every Sunday, and once a month went to Mineral Wells, the closest town, to do her laundry at a self-service laundromat and buy groceries. She always felt more at ease around animals and in the outdoors, frequently going for days at a time without speaking to anyone. Lois never had a romantic partner. Not even a doctor had ever seen her undressed in front of a man. In 2001, Lois met Jeffrey Maxwell soon after he purchased land west of her property in Weatherford, Texas. Lois was a little over 50 at the time, and Maxwell was just under 50. Sometimes they spoke to each other, and he would wave to her when he went by her house. Maxwell once asked her to join him for lunch. Lois was taken aback by the invitation and politely declined, as she always does. Another time, he arrived at her house, hopped out of his car, and abruptly requested a kiss. In particular, the expectant smirk on his face offended Lois. She insisted that he never return to her home. He moved away in 2005, but to her utter amazement, they reconnected just before he left. They had a quick, unhurried conversation. He came by to say goodbye and to show her photos of a modular house he was constructing in Corsicana. Lois had no idea that she would see Jeffrey Maxwell again after this farewell visit. Lois was getting ready for her usual grocery run in the afternoon of March 1, 2011. A silver Chevy Trailblazer pulled up behind her, 1970 Nova, as she was about to leave. He would have missed her if he had come 5 minutes later. Maxwell grinned and gave Lois a warm greeting. He got out of his car and started talking to her about the church. He moved slowly toward her as she responded, and she began to move away. They soon found themselves in the rear of her house. Lois tried to nudge Maxwell back toward the driveway, feeling a little ashamed of the well water containers nearby. She saw an odd change in his expression all of a sudden. It was so obvious that they both fell silent. Maxwell pulled a strange-looking container out of his coat pocket and held it up to Lois's face. He tried to hit both of her eyes with a stream of pepper spray before she could say anything, but the spray did not work. Lois sprinted in the direction of the barbed wire fence close to her vehicle. When he caught up to her, Lois had just made it to the fence and placed her hands on the top wire. He caught her and pulled her to her feet, but she clung to the wire despite the spikes digging into her fingers and the blood dripping from her hands. He was able to throw her to the ground in front of his SUV, though, because he was too strong. Lois tried to scream as loudly as she could, but nobody was around and her house was remote. Maxwell picked Lois up once more, placed her in what appeared to be handcuffs, and opened his car's rear door. He shoved her into the car and she fought to get out. He took her mother's wooden rolling pin off the kitchen table and hit Lois in the left side of the head. He struck her more forcefully on the right side when she failed to fall. The blow knocked her to the ground this time. Almost immediately, Lois's eyelids began to swell, but she persisted in trying to get away until he reached for a big kitchen knife. Silently, she sat down and felt the lightheadedness and blood. Maxwell inquired about her duct tape storage. She said nothing. He asked again, but received no answer. Then he tied Lois to the door handle of the living room and sliced the cord of her lamp into pieces. He went to his car outside. For a few seconds he was gone, but she was able to free her wrists, which had always been rather thin. She leaped to her feet and sprinted out the door. Even with ankle cuffs on, Lois had already run a few hundred yards down the road when he got back to the house, realized she was gone, and got into his car. Maxwell followed, stopping directly in front of her and obstructing her way. With a gun in his hand, he exited the vehicle. He stated, "Now we're moving on to Plan B," with a chilly look on his face. He pushed her inside his car after opening the rear door and refastened her handcuffs. He then covered her mouth with a tiny piece of duct tape. He smiled and said, "Are you a virgin?" She began to cry at that point. He slammed the door and got behind the wheel after laughing at her tears. He told her he would have to return and set her house on fire as he drove off. Lois heard the vehicle enter the freeway. She considered trying to raise her feet in the hopes that oncoming cars would see her handcuffs and assist her, but she felt completely powerless when she realized the car had tinted windows and that other drivers wouldn't be able to see her. She thought about using a tire iron to strike Maxwell, but she knew it would only make him more angry. She also considered rolling out onto the road and opening the back door, but she was unable to locate the handle. Maxwell listened to her prayer and assured her that she would no longer believe in God once he was done with her. The vehicle went off course. Lois was not familiar with the terrain. The kidnapper took her into a house's garage and shut the door after her. Cluttered with various objects, including patio furniture, a lawn mower, a lot of tools, a washing machine, and a dryer in the corner, she looked around the room. Maxwell took her handcuffs off. He started taking off all of Lois's clothing, cutting off her bra with a knife. Then he fastened her hands to the ends of a steel pole that was chained from the ceiling. She watched without understanding what was going on as he flipped a switch on the yellow control panel that was connected to the ceiling by a cable at the same location as the chains. She felt her shoulders suddenly rise, followed by her arms. As she climbed higher and higher, the ceiling motor hummed. Lois felt her bare legs hanging futilely in midair as Maxwell flipped the switch once more, causing the motor to go silent. Jeffrey Maxwell was renowned for his ability to get out of any predicament, be it shooting cattle to prevent them from being fed, burning down his own home to get insurance money, or something much darker. In the early 1980s, Maxwell corresponded with Martha Martinez, who was from Mexico. After many years of correspondence, Jeffrey finally went to Mexico and asked her to marry him. Because he deftly exploited her fears and lack of confidence, her family didn't like him at first. The 29-year-old woman felt that this was her opportunity to marry and have a child, despite her family's entreaties not to do so. She married Maxwell, had a son, and moved to Watauga, a Fort Worth, Texas suburb, with him. Maxwell had 3 children. When Rita, his girlfriend, became pregnant at the age of 18, he married her. However, they separated in 1,979 days following the birth of their second child. Marta managed to conceal her husband's actions from her family, but she was unable to conceal from her friends the bruises that appeared to be from shackles on her arms and legs. However, this paled in comparison to the horror Martha would later encounter. A deputy sheriff from Ardmore, Oklahoma, called the Watauga, Texas police station on Sunday, April 19, 1987. They had discovered a woman on the road early that morning, he reported. A deep wound on her neck had caused her to lose a lot of blood after being severely beaten. Martha Maxwell was the woman. When the police arrived at the family's house, they asked Maxwell when he had last seen his wife. He said he hadn't seen her since the previous evening and was shocked to learn that Martha was hurt but still alive. Thankfully, medical professionals were able to save her life. When she regained consciousness, she described the argument she had with her husband. She dozed off on the couch after he beat her, only to awaken bound with duct tape. Following more mistreatment, Maxwell made her drink a substance that instantly put her to sleep. In the hospital, she awoke. Martha initially assisted the police, but she abruptly stopped speaking with investigators after her husband was arrested and charged with kidnapping. Since a search of the house and car turned up no evidence, the police were unable to charge Maxwell with anything without her testimony. Once more, Jeffrey Maxwell slipped through the gaps. Martha traveled to Mexico with her son. Her husband, however, was not going to let her go so readily. Playing on her Catholic background, he pounded her with letters, even accusing her of the incident. Martha was living with Jeffrey again a month after the charges against him were dropped, despite her family's entreaties for her to stay away. The family's life appeared to be returning to normal. They purchased a new home, and Martha started college. However, it was only the quiet before the storm. She, or allegedly from her, sent letters to two family members on May 10, 1992. In her letter, Martha stated that she would not be communicating with her son or husband for some time. Her relatives didn't think Martha was the sender of the letters. First of all, she typically just gave them a call. Second, she would have written a letter in Spanish rather than English if she had. Maxwell hung up the phone after Martha's brother informed him that Martha had left. In order to report his sister missing, he had to travel to Texas. Since she would never have left without money, documents, a car, and most importantly her cherished son, he was certain that she was dead and that her husband was to blame. But the hunt for Martha was unsuccessful. When police questioned him years later about whether he had done anything that could have caused his wife Martha's death, Maxwell said, "Not intentionally." Jeffrey filed for divorce a few years after she vanished. He remarried Rita, his first wife, as soon as the divorce was finalized, and she moved in with him along with her 3 daughters from her second marriage. The girls soon started griping about their stepfather's advances at school, and Rita's best friend disclosed that Maxwell had beaten her 2 days prior to their wedding. But Rita didn't take the kids, leave the state, change her name, and flee, until the police came to the family's house after her youngest daughter complained about her stepfather's actions. Maxwell started shouting at Lois as he lifted her into the air. The fact that she had ignored him in the car still infuriated him. After sensing his hands on her, the woman felt something sharp and hard, like a plastic bullet. It was really painful, and it felt like he was attempting to hurt her with this vibrating object. Maxwell began striking Lois with rods of various sizes, after declaring that they would be together for 2 weeks. He hit her all over, including the painful spot on her chest. All Lois could do was scream in pain. She was barely able to stand when he finally lowered her to the ground. After guiding her to the restroom, Maxwell gave her instructions to wash up. She first noticed that she was covered in bruises. Because she was afraid of losing her eye, her right eyelid was so swollen that she could hardly see. After a hasty shower, the kidnapper himself handed her his jeans. They smelled like Maxwell and were too big for Lois. It was awful, but she knew that if she didn't agitate him over insignificant things, she would live longer. He shut off the lights, laid down next to her, and chained her ankles to the bed that night. Maxwell barely slept, and Lois had trouble shutting her eyes. Even in the dark, she could see his round, owl-like eyes every time she turned to face him. It was the first night she had spent away from home in more than 40 years. On the morning of the second day, Maxwell informed Lois that he had to purchase additional padlocks from the store. He took her to the garage and showed her a wooden box that he had made himself. The wood smelled and looked brand new. He gave her a choice between the box and a torture device. She made up her mind right away that she would stop at nothing to avoid getting on that machine. As a gag, Maxwell put a metal ring in her mouth and fastened it with a strap. Then he put Lois in shackles and handcuffs and told her to lie in the box. She inquired as to whether she would have enough air through the gag. With the lid slightly open, Maxwell positioned a wrench on the box's edge and walked away. After hearing the sound of his car's engine, Lois waited for a few seconds before attempting to exit the box. However, despite her best efforts, she was only able to push the key away and lock herself in total darkness. She didn't realize Maxwell had moved the box beneath a heavy workbench until he came back. When they got home, the kidnapper took Lois to the bedroom and took off her clothes. Lois didn't know what he was doing, and she felt uneasy because her parents had never talked to her about private matters. He asked her if she wanted to go to the garage and hang upside down after she let out a painful scream. Then she made an effort to be silent. After he was done, he once more chained her legs to the bed. She was so tired that night that she was able to sleep. Maxwell had to pay a bill for his son's repair in Dallas early in the morning. As usual, he chained her and placed a gag in her mouth. In the distance, Lois could hear motorboats, motorcycles, and cars. The gag prevented anyone from hearing her screams or calls for assistance. Lois didn't realize Maxwell had broken her front teeth until he came back and took the metal ring out of her mouth. However, she lost something far more significant that day. Maxwell let her watch the news after they displayed a picture of her driver's license on the TV. Lois Pearson was listed as missing after learning that the home where she had grown up and shared many memories was gone. They were trying to find her. The days that followed were all the same. He met his needs with her in the mornings and then left her alone. He made sure she was chained to the bed for a few days, even when he hurried to the mailbox or take a shower. But the kidnapper grew less cautious over time. She discovered one day that he had left his cell phone in the restroom. She considered taking it and calling the police, but she was hesitant because she had never used a cell phone before and was worried about making a mistake. She was afraid that he would use that torture device once more, in addition to losing faith in her. Lois dropped that notion, but she continued to think about a way out, or at least a way to change the balance of power. And after being held captive for a week, she figured out how to resist his persistent advances. She remembered what her parents had said when he lay next to her on the 7th day and pressed his mouth to hers. They had informed her that her oral cavity allegedly contained an agent that caused bronchitis. She never kissed boys when she was younger for this reason, among others. It's difficult to tell what actually happened at the time, but Maxwell woke up the following day with a fever and chills after she let him touch her lips, calling the move a battle of microbes. He could hardly move from his bed and was pale. He never tried to take advantage of her again. He insisted that she write him a check for $500 on the morning of the 8th day. He told her to date it February 2nd, which was more than a month earlier, and explained that groceries cost money. She had already prepared to go shopping in town with the $60 he had taken from her wallet, but she didn't protest, figuring the money would buy her a few more days. The date was March 12, 2011, and when Sergeant Ricky Montgomery and 4 other police officers pulled up to a small home on the shores of a lake in Corsicana, 80 kilometers south of Dallas, it was getting close to 6 o'clock in the evening. They were there to ask the homeowner some questions regarding the missing 62-year-old woman. Search teams started searching the area after her house burned down and her remains were not discovered. After several days, the police concluded that Lois Pearson would not be found alive, despite the use of helicopters equipped with thermal imaging for the search. They brought in pumps to empty 2 ponds and used search dogs trained to locate bodies, but the woman was nowhere to be seen. Then, $500 was taken out of her account 8 days after the fire. The check was dated a few weeks earlier and was made out to Jeffrey Maxwell. Officers traveled more than 160 kilometers to question Maxwell after learning that he also owned a blue SUV that matched the description of the car a neighbor had seen the day of the fire. A judge then issued a search warrant for the vehicle. On Sunday, March 12th, the 12th day of Lois's captivity under Maxwell, everything went according to plan. Maxwell watched television while Lois prayed on the floor. The abductor jumped up and hurriedly led Lois to a far-off room, telling her to keep quiet when they both heard a knock at the door. They heard another more insistent knock before he could put a gag on her or handcuff her. The man rushed toward the exit. Although Lois could hear voices outside, she was unable to understand what they were saying. After escaping the room, she noticed the word sheriff on a car parked by the road through the window. She was shocked when fear first paralyzed her whole body, but she quickly realized it was her opportunity and took off running. Jeffrey Maxwell stepped out of the house and shut the door firmly behind him. His house was in a terrible mess, he said with an apologetic tone while grinning at the policeman. According to Sergeant Ricky Montgomery, they were interrogating anyone who knew Ms. Lois Pearson or had recently visited the area around her home. In response, Maxwell said that although Lois was his neighbor, he hadn't seen her in a while. He also mentioned that Lois owed him money, which is why she sent him a check. When the door swung wide open, Montgomery was still asking Maxwell if he would be willing to come to the sheriff's office. An older woman's feeble voice reached them. With her face bruised and her hair disheveled and tangled, the woman looked weak and stooped. She moved quickly past Maxwell and went up to the cops. Montgomery didn't recognize the missing woman, but he did have a picture of her. He said, "Who are you?" "It's her, Lois Pearson," cried one of the officers behind Montgomery before she could respond, and everyone in the room was momentarily stunned. The police officers collected themselves and put Maxwell in handcuffs. The woman initially claimed to the officers that Maxwell had been her friend and had not harmed her. Her only memory of her rescue is the fear for her life, even though she later learned about the concept of Stockholm Syndrome. Lois told the officers that Maxwell had abducted her, beaten her, and done things to her that she didn't want when he was removed a few minutes later. When she mentioned the machine, the officers were initially perplexed, but as soon as they searched the house, they discovered the machine she had described, along with a yellow control device that was covered in blood. In addition, they discovered 4 different-sized adult toys, a lot of adhesive tape, whips, handcuffs, and weapons all over the house. Blood was found on several articles of clothing in the house, on the floor in front of the car, and on the bedding. Additionally, a large collection of adult films was found by the police. After being questioned for 3 days, Maxwell admitted to almost everything. February 14, 2012 marked the start of the trial. Maxwell shaved his beard and shed more than 60 pounds in the months between his arrest and the trial. He was a lanky, ghostly figure now, wearing a suit that didn't fit him well. Maxwell was found guilty on all 3 counts by the jury in less than an hour. The jurors heard from Rita's friend, whom Maxwell had beaten 2 days prior to their wedding, despite the judge's ban on discussing his wife Martha's disappearance during the trial. Additionally, Rita's daughters testified about how their stepfather's advances affected them. Lois gave a court testimony as well. Although she had always been reticent to speak in front of others, she now spoke forcefully about the ordeal she had gone through during those 12 days of imprisonment. She recalled the 3 cats that had died in the fire, Bluey, Blackie, and an unnamed kitten, and detailed the wounds that still plagued her a year later. Above all, she believed that she would be rewarded in heaven if she remained innocent all her life. Once more, the defendant was given 3 consecutive life sentences by the jury in less than an hour. Maxwell would be eligible for parole no earlier than 119 years following the verdict, as the judge decided that he would not serve the sentences concurrently. A deputy sheriff led Maxwell out of the courtroom while shackling his ankles and handcuffing his wrists in front of the audience. After the trial, Lois told reporters that she wanted her story to be known so that everyone could hear how her faith had carried her through difficult times. Even though victims of such crimes typically don't want their names mentioned in the media, she occasionally questions why he picked her. Maybe Maxwell knew she would be the ideal victim if she vanished from home for a few days and no one would notice. Someone might have gone looking for her if he hadn't messed up and put her to sleep. She might have been noticed missing by someone. Lois had memories of her previous life after spending 12 days with Jeffrey Maxwell. Her home and the car she cherished were not the only things he took away. He took her mother's sheet music and her piano. She doesn't have a picture of her father anymore, and she doesn't even know if there is one. To purchase a small trailer for her, her church raised more than $17,000. Although it's not the house she grew up in, the trailer is warm and comfortable, and the old house was always cold in the winter and full of pests. She now has a phone, and the church even gave her a new piano. Lois Pearson loves spending time with her new friends, but she still prefers the peace and quiet of nature. She admits, "Before this, I never knew how much I loved people." And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments, what part of this story shocked you the most? Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. In December 2010, at St. Malachi's Church in Tyrone, Northern Ireland, it all began exactly where it ended. In front of more than 300 guests, beauty queen and educator Michaela Hardy and athlete John McArevey exchanged vows. But 3 weeks later, John came back with his young wife's body, buried in her immaculate wedding dress. What caused Michaela to pass away? Who could be so cold-blooded and cunning as to murder a woman who had just recently started to enjoy her wedded life with her beloved? And will international cooperation aid in the investigation of one of the most horrific and unforgettable crimes of the past several years? In 2005, John McArevey, the captain of the Irish football team, and Michaela Hardy, the daughter of one of the nation's best football managers, met in university. The young couple fell in love at first sight and had never been apart since. Michaela gladly accepted John's proposal while on vacation in Paris. On New Year's Eve, which was also Michaela's 27th birthday, they scheduled their wedding. Following the formal wedding, the newlyweds flew out on their 3-week honeymoon. Before the most anticipated portion of their trip, 2 weeks at the 5-star Legends Hotel, situated in the fishing village of Grand Gabe on the northeast coast of Mauritius, began. They spent the first week in Dubai. Michaela thoroughly investigated local hotels before deciding on Mauritius as their idyllic honeymoon destination. They chose the Legends Hotel because it has a lot of good evaluations and is well liked by Irish travelers. They asked the hotel's receptionist if they could be assigned to one of the better rooms when they first arrived. They were told that room 1025 in the premium block was available. On January 10, 2011, after having breakfast together, John opted to play golf while Michaela sunbathed. They had lunch together once more. After lunch, Michaela usually looked forward to tea with something tasty. While she went to the room to get Kit Kat bars with her favorite dark chocolate, which she had bought from Dubai and placed in the refrigerator, she requested her husband to get tea. Although John offered to bring her the snacks, she chose to go alone because the accommodation was only 150 feet from the restaurant. While waiting for his wife to come home, John viewed videos and shot some pictures. After a while, he started to question why Michaela hadn't returned. He made the decision to find her. John knocked on the door but got no answer. He went to the receptionist after forgetting his key in the room and failing to see anything through the window. After guiding him back to the room, the corridor attendant used his key to open the door. However, the corridor attendant heard a man's cries for urgent assistance as soon as he moved a short distance away from the door. John walked into the room and found his wife in the cold water bathtub. Her lips were blue, her skin was cold to the touch, and there were noticeable bruises on her neck. John tried to assist Michaela, supposing she had planned to take a bath because of back problems, but had slid or passed out. But his attempts were unsuccessful. The dreams of a young, contented married couple came to an end when medical authorities declared Michaela dead within an hour. People kept coming and going from the newlyweds' room, and no one tried to protect the crime scene, perhaps since it was initially assumed to be an unfortunate accident. When the police entered the room and saw Michaela's condition and the chaos within, they assumed a murder had occurred, even though they had been told that a tourist had drowned. After being brought to the police station, the distressed spouse was detained for 5 hours while being questioned. Given that most murders are carried out by people who are close to the victims, this was not unusual. The harshness and inappropriateness of the police officer's remarks in John's situation were unusual. John was obviously overcome with grief by Michaela's passing. He found his wife's lifeless body in the bathtub, while only 30 minutes before he had seen her joyfully making her way to their room. But when a policeman noticed that he was crying, he may have tried to comfort him by saying, "Why are you crying? You're still young, you'll find yourself a new wife." If the hotel manager hadn't stepped in, it's unclear how long they would have held John at the station. The management reported to the police that a master key that was taken and fit all the locks had been used to open the door of room 1025. It became clear that a member of the hotel staff was responsible for the murder. Most likely, it was an accidental killing. At 2:42 p.m., a staff member, possibly a security guard with the master key, entered the room. Michaela opened her own door 2 minutes later. The maid's sudden appearance forced the thief, who might have been hiding in a tiny alcove in the toilet, to make a snap decision. Since cleaning rooms is a standard procedure in hotels, he could have just grinned at Michaela and pretended to do his job if it was part of his responsibilities. Nothing would have happened. He was aware that his presence in the room would be difficult to explain, though, if he was a security guard. He then saw no choice but to hide in the bathroom and wait for the woman to just go. However, that did not occur. Michaela chose to seize the chance and went into the restroom as investigators conjectured. She found the robber inside. The thief attacked Michaela in a panic after she fled in fear. He put Michaela in the bathtub after realizing that he had killed her, possibly in an attempt to make it seem like an accident involving the maid. Despite the shock, he may have also imagined that water would wash away any DNA evidence left on his victim. The murderer was still present when John got up from the table at 3:05 p.m. to see why his wife was taking so long. John could have apprehended the murderer at the spot if he had his key card with him, but by the time he approached the administrator, requested that the door be unlocked, and stepped into the room, it was 3:26 p.m., and the thief, who had inadvertently become a murderer, had disappeared. The cops were under tremendous pressure to release John. It is critical to settle the case as soon as possible. when a visitor is slain in a nation that depends significantly on tourism. The local police head claimed that the island had a 100% homicide clearance rate, which gave the impression that the case would be resolved quickly. Given that Michaela was one of 30 persons slain on the island in 2011, and that all cases but Michaela's were resolved by dubious confessions, one might assume he was merely praising the work of his colleagues, but any professional would be cautious. The police once again used admissions to solve every case the following year. The investigators had a perfect crime scene, which may have made up for the police's over-reliance on instinct and intuition, if that's what it is. Surveillance cameras were installed all throughout the hotel, the room was cleaned daily, the security system recorded every entry, and the hotel itself was essentially an invincible fortress with watchful security personnel everywhere. That was not at all the case, as we shall see in a moment. 2 hotel staff members were detained by the police within 2 days after the murder, and 2 of them, Avinash Tribhovan and Sandeep Munia, were charged with the crime. The other staff members obligingly became important prosecution witnesses. Dasan Narayanan, a hotel security guard, was also taken into custody a week later. On the day of the murder, Dasan was on duty. His fingerprints were discovered on a phony key that the robbers used to replace the stolen universal key in the security room, although it was impossible to determine his precise position at the time of the crime. There was nothing Dasan could do to explain how his DNA got onto the room's safe door. He gave a preemptive explanation for why his DNA might be present if it were discovered, acknowledging that he had touched Michele's cheek in his haste to assist John. Nevertheless, the police chose to concentrate their efforts on Avinash and Sandeep and merely charged Dasan with being an accomplice to the thefts, despite his contradictory testimony. In 2012, the trial started on May 22. The police's pattern of obtaining confessions served as the foundation for the prosecution's case. According to the prosecution, Michaela discovered Avinash and Sandeep stealing cash from the safe or her purse when she returned to the hotel that day. In order to save their jobs, the robbers chose to silence Michaela because hotel workers frequently provide the majority of their family's income, not just their close relatives. Their colleague Raj Thikoi also provided testimony during the trial. After being arrested at first, he was granted immunity and turned out to be the most important prosecution witness. Raj claimed that although he was close to the room and heard a woman's anguished cries, he chose not to knock on the door. Rather, he hid and watched as Sandeep and an upset, sweaty Avinash left the newlyweds' room. When he later inquired about what had transpired, they responded, "Nothing happened, just keep quiet. If you say anything, we'll involve you in this matter." Prosecutors mostly relied on the confession that one of the suspects, Avinash Tribhovan, gave, in accordance with standard police procedures, in addition to witness statements. Because of their negligent investigation, it appeared as though the police were being judged alongside Sandeep and Avinash, even though they were the ones who were implicated. The defense lawyers called attention to all of the investigators' obvious flaws, errors, and gaps. First of all, the hotel was not closed when Michaela's death was found, and neither a visitor nor a staff member was questioned. The evidence was compromised since some tests were not carried out and others weren't done until the hotel room was given back to them. Although palm and fingerprints were discovered in the room, their owners were not recognized. However, there was no DNA evidence that Sandeep and Avinash were guilty. Even the paper money, which the authorities said the robbers were interested in, was not scanned for DNA or fingerprint. The court was also informed that numerous significant artifacts were not captured at all, and that all of the photos taken at the crime scene were in black and white. The enigma surrounding the 46 security cameras that recorded the activities within and outside the hotel, however, generated the most controversy. The cops refused to give the defense lawyers the videotapes in spite of repeated requests. As it turned out, they were unable to conceal the footage, not because they wanted to. Due to their inability to control the cameras, the police officers deleted 90% of the videos. Instead of providing a truthful response when asked to explain how the apparatus operates, they merely hit the button, which also happened to be the record button, and when they believed they were playing back the recordings, they were actually erasing them. International media questioned whether the local authorities were purposefully undermining the probe due to the police's obvious incompetence. Lastly, the defendants asserted that they only confessed after the police tortured them. Sandeep, who reportedly handed the key card, stated that he was forced to make the confession under threat of a firearm. Avinash also refuted his testimony, claiming that he vomited blood after being tortured and subjected to water interrogation by the police. He was also allegedly informed that his wife would be deported and that he would have to move to Ireland to live with John McAvery, who would now require a new wife. Avinash claimed that he only signed the document that was given to him, not even reading his own confession. Even though he and Sandeep were in room 1009 where a VIP customer was scheduled to stay when the murder occurred, another witness said he was coerced into providing false testimony. Sandeep demanded that his subordinate keep the space spotless at all times. He even picked up the mop personally at one point to show how the floors should be cleaned. Telecommunications data also supported Sandeep's assertion that he was speaking on the phone with his sister in Britain at the time of the incident. Lastly, it was verified by the retained security camera film that he was in a separate area of the hotel when the murder occurred. The court case took over 8 weeks to complete, even though it was only supposed to take 2 weeks. This was mostly because the defense lawyers went beyond the bounds of decency and made the trial into a spectacle. They frequently cracked jokes and caused the board, spectators, and law students in the courtroom to erupt in laughter. The defense brought up the possibility of a sexual motive for the crime, implying that Michaela's husband was involved. They implied potential wrongdoing between John and his wife and mentioned an intimate aid they discovered in the hotel room. But it was actually a straightforward insert from Cosmopolitan, a women's magazine Michaela had bought at the airport. Then, using a purportedly verified video, they tried to demonstrate that John and Michaela had a heated argument, but the people in the video weren't Michaela and John. Rather, they were two Germans who looked like them. In order to verify that he was the man in the video, John had to reach out to him on Facebook and ask him to give a statement at a German police station. All things considered, the sensationalism surrounding Michaela's murder case caused great distress to her family. Specifically, John was ranked highly on the list of readers' choices in a survey called Who Killed Michaela that was published by a local newspaper. In addition, the police released pictures of Michaela's battered and nude body to the Mauritius newspaper, which caused her family unimaginable distress. But these 8 weeks were over, and the jury members had to decide what to do. After a guilty conviction, Michaela's family thought the accused would have the right to request a review of the case because the judge gave a clear summary of the case and highlighted the suspect's culpability. They were certain that the verdict would be just what they had expected. The court also firmly asked the jurors to make the appropriate choice from their point of view, rather than to think about how this case would affect the nation's reputation. And the jury found Avinash and Sandeep not guilty, after 2 months of trial and just 2 hours of deliberation. After the acquittal verdict, John and Michaela's families were incredibly disappointed. They endured all the agony of the process, inappropriate remarks from attorneys and police, tolerated laughter in the courtroom, and even faced aggressive behavior from the locals because they were confident that the guilty parties would be punished for the murder. They were certain of Avinash and Sandeep's guilt and believed that they were acquitted because the case received global media attention, and the jurors did not want the murder case to reflect negatively on Mauritius' image. The Hart and McCarvey families cannot forget that Avinash's lawyer appeared on a local radio station and essentially admitted his client's guilt, mentioning how Avinash cried and apologized to Michaela's family. The interview was supposed to be presented in court, but the lawyer managed to evade his responsibilities. John believes that Avinash told the truth when he confessed to Michaela's murder. He is why, when everyone hears about death by strangling, they image the killer suffocating the victim, ripping their neck with 2 hands. But Avinash recalled that when they were in the honeymoon suite, Michaela walked in and spotted him clutching a pocketbook. She asked what he was doing. She couldn't have known that Sandeep was in the bathroom. When the girl tried to prevent Avinash from leaving the room, standing in his path, Sandeep approached her from behind and put one hand around her neck. The truth is, the autopsy report was prepared much later, and it confirmed that everything happened exactly as Avinash claimed. If Avinash wasn't certain, how could he have created such a strangulation technique? Avinash added that when Michaela fell, she struck her head on the ground. That was further supported by a bruise discovered on the back of her skull during the post-mortem. Furthermore, in summarizing the case, the judge reminded everyone that Avinash made his confession on January 12 and signed it on the 13th in the presence of his lawyer. Avinash would have been made to sign something else on the 12th if the cops had intended to fake the confession. Furthermore, 3 other doctors evaluated the youngster on separate days, and none of them discovered any evidence of abuse. After the acquittal verdict, a new investigation was launched. The key card that the murderer and thief used to enter the room was the main piece of evidence that the police concentrated on. Even these locks' mechanism, though, is unreliable. It is impossible to pinpoint the precise moment the murderer entered Michaela's room because the 240 locks in the Legends Hotel are not synced, and each one displays its unique time on the security system's dashboard. Because the precise hour of the crime is uncertain, this puts almost every suspect's alibi into doubt. The situation was exacerbated by the discovery of yet another serious weakness in the hotel's guest security. The number of possible suspects could rise from dozens to hundreds as a result of this vulnerability. Mauritian law states that the beach is public property if the hotel owns the guest rooms, dining establishments, bars, golf courses, and other such places. Locals own the island's beaches, and traders and fishermen have always had complete access to the hotel's grounds and the beach. Young boys are used to hanging around on the hotel grounds, and local craftsmen sell their wares to visitors. To put it another way, the hotel cannot guarantee the security of its property, even with cameras, gates, and security guards, and there is no way to confirm who entered the honeymoon room. Consequently, there were no noteworthy discoveries made during the fresh inquiry into the matter. Under international pressure, the Mauritian police examined Michaela's murder many times and even sought the services of a French laboratory for retesting DNA evidence. The discovery of DNA on Michaela's clothing that matched that of one of the suspects was reported as a major breakthrough in 2014, but this finding wasn't enough to justify a new trial. John offered a sizable reward for information regarding the case in 2017, in an effort to bring it back into the public eye. A lawyer called him a few weeks after he got back home to tell him that Sandeep and Avinash would now undoubtedly be arrested. Michaela's family was relieved and thought they would finally receive justice, but the attorney did not name the new evidence that made this possible. But months and weeks went by with no one being taken into custody. The case was formally ended in 2020, but the Mauritius government agreed to revisit it in 2021 after pressure from Irish MPs. A desire to re-examine the matter does not ensure that it will be resolved, which is the problem. It is difficult to investigate any crime after 10 years, not to mention the potential that Mauritius's authorities would not be motivated to track down the murderers. Many investigators have advanced in their careers over the course of 10 years, so if something is disclosed in the case that many would rather keep hidden, heads will roll. Following the trial, the relatives of John and Michaela sued the hotel for $1.6 million. The terms of the out-of-court settlement are not made public, but the funds were donated to a charity set up in Michaela's memory. Both the Legends Hotel, which was renamed the Lux Hotel, and Room 1025, which was renovated and given the new number 1026, are still quite popular. At a memorial luncheon for Michaela in 2013, John, who is now an accountant, met a sweet girl called Cara Brennan. John proposed to Cara, who works as an accountant, in 2015. James McAravey, the couple's first child, was born last year. And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments what part of this story shocked you the most. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The nation was rocked by the disappearance of Adam Walsh from Hollywood, Florida, on July 27, 2981. He vanished from a nearby Sears store, and the ensuing investigation was beset by misunderstandings and errors, leaving detectives frustrated and with dead ends. Adam's family was left in despair when police were unable to piece together a clear timeline or motive despite a plethora of leads. What serious errors occurred during this investigation, and how did the pursuit of justice come to a standstill? Let's examine the specifics. Reeve and John Walsh welcomed Adam Walsh into the world in Hollywood, Florida. He was a normal child who made his parents happy, loved baseball, and was quiet. But after going missing on July 27, 1981, when he was 6 years old, he became well known. Adam and his mother, Reeve, went shopping at the Hollywood Mall that summer afternoon. They went directly to the Sears store after entering the mall via the north entrance. Reeve was there with a specific goal in mind: to ask questions regarding a lamp that was for sale. She left Adam at a kiosk with Atari 2600 video games, where a number of other boys were gathered and playing the games, to keep him occupied while she took care of her business. Around 12:15 p.m., Rev finished her questions in the lamp department and went back to the kiosk where she had left Adam. Adam and the other boys were gone, and she was shocked to find this out. Rev was overcome with fear, as any parent would be when they lose sight of their child. She was told by a store manager that the boys had gotten into a fight over who would get to play the video games first. A security guard responded to the commotion by telling the boys to leave the store. The older boys responded that their parents were not present in the store when the guard asked them if they were. This implied that Adam, who was quieter and younger, probably lacked an adult companion to provide him with support at that time. Adam was a shy kid, and Rev later surmised that he might have been too scared to speak up when the security guard was questioning him. She thought the guard likely didn't realize Adam was alone, because he thought he was one of the boys. The security officer forced Adam to leave through the same door that the other boys had used to enter the store, the Sears West entrance. Adam's parents were increasingly worried about his safety after he went outside because they thought he had lost contact with the group and was now alone in a strange place. As the minutes went by, Rev frantically looked around the toy section for Adam, but was unable to locate him. Her panic increased in intensity with every second that went by. She asked the store staff to shout his name over the loudspeakers in a last-ditch effort to find him, hoping that if Adam heard it, he would come back to her. She kept searching the store, calling out his name and searching every hallway in the hopes of finding him while she awaited a response. She happened to run into Jean, her mother-in-law, who volunteered to assist in finding Adam right away. They searched the store together, asking staff and other customers if they had seen him. But after searching for more than 90 minutes and calling on Adam several times without finding him, Rev realized that time was of the essence. She had a growing fear in her heart that something horrible had occurred. She made the difficult choice to call the Hollywood police at 1:55 p.m. with a heavy heart and a sense of urgency. She had no idea that her worst nightmare was going to come true. A massive search for her son was launched in response to this call, with ground crews searching the area for any hints and helicopters hovering overhead. A horrifying find was made in a drainage canal next to the Florida Turnpike, close to Vero Beach, on August 10. On closer examination, two fishermen saw what appeared to be the head of a baby doll floating in the water, but it turned out to be a child's detached head. They called the police right away, horrified. The Indian River County Sheriff's Office sent Detective Ralphie Latimer Jr. and a deputy to the scene to conduct an investigation. Regretfully, no additional remains were discovered during the canal search conducted by divers from Indian River County and St. Lucie County. Adam's parents, meanwhile, continued to hope that their son was still alive. They were left to look for him by themselves, heartbroken and feeling totally powerless. The FBI's National Crime Database at the time allowed reports of stolen vehicles including horses, but there was no mechanism in place for missing children. Because of this, law enforcement was unable to communicate important details about missing children, giving the impression that Adam might be anywhere. Adam's parents made a public plea for their son's safe return on the Good Morning America television show on the morning of August 11th. In the hopes that their message would strike a chord with viewers and inspire anyone with information to come forward, they shared their anguish and desperation. Additionally, they promised a $100,000 reward for any leads that could lead to Adam's location. This outreach emphasized the gravity and urgency of the situation and was a component of their attempt to engage the community in the search. The medical examination was essential in identifying the recovered remains as the investigation progressed. Adam's dental chart and the severed head discovered in the canal were thoroughly examined by the coroner's office. One notable similarity that emerged from this comparison was a filling on the cheek side of a lower left molar. This distinctive dental feature verified that the remains were, in fact, those of Adam Walsh. The coroner then conducted an autopsy to ascertain the cause of death. Adam had died from asphyxiation, according to the examination, which indicated a lack of oxygen because of an obstruction of the airway. This suggested that the act was violent and planned. In addition, The condition of his remains indicated that Adam had most likely passed away a few days prior to his head being found. Adam's death was officially declared a homicide by the coroner, which horribly confirmed the worst suspicions. Despite thorough searches of the canal and the surrounding areas, the remainder of Adam's body was never found, which presented a major challenge to the investigation. The nation was shocked when Adam's head was found 130 miles from his Hollywood home. People were saddened and deeply disturbed by the heinous crime. The way the Hollywood Police Department conducted the investigation into their son's disappearance infuriated John and Reeve Walsh. They believed the case was not handled with the necessary urgency from the beginning, which resulted in a disjointed response that made them feel powerless. John took action to bring attention to Adam in those early days. He held press conferences, distributed flyers featuring Adam's photo, and contacted the local media to request information. In addition to finding Adam, they wanted to force a more exhaustive police investigation. They argued for a thorough investigation of every lead during their meetings with law enforcement. They persisted in trying, but the police's lack of cooperation demoralized them more and more. John became a vocal critic of the investigation as a result of his frustration, which eventually influenced his subsequent public policy work. Their message was further amplified by John Walsh's hosting of the 1988 premiere of the television program America's Most Wanted. The program developed into a potent vehicle for bringing attention to wanted criminals and missing children, in order to encourage viewers to pay attention and report any information they may have. Each episode included segments on current missing child cases. In addition to educating the public about the realities of child abduction, the series gave law enforcement a way to ask for community assistance. The life of convicted serial killer Otis Elwood Toole was filled with violence, abuse, and chaos. Toole was born in Jacksonville, Florida, on March 5, 1947. His early years were characterized by an abusive mother who dressed him in girl clothes and called him Susan, an alcoholic father who abandoned him, and a maternal grandmother who exposed him to satanic rituals and practices. His older sister and a neighbor next door were among the many family members and acquaintances who sexually assaulted him. With an IQ of 75, Toole was categorized as having mildly disabled intellectual capacity. Due to his epilepsy, he frequently had grand mal seizures. Toole visited gay bars and became a prostitute as a teenager. At the age of 14, he allegedly committed his first murder in 1961 after being coerced into having sex by a traveling salesman. In the 9th grade, Toole left school and started living on the streets of the southwestern United States, earning a living through panhandling and prostitution. Toole, then 17 years old, was arrested for loitering in August 1965. Although there is little evidence of his activities after this arrest, authorities believe he drifted around the southwestern United States between 1966 and 1973, making a living through panhandling and prostitution. Toole was implicated in the 1974 murder of Patricia Webb, a 24-year-old woman in Nebraska. He left Nebraska shortly after and briefly made Boulder, Colorado, his home. His stay was brief, though, as he quickly emerged as a leading suspect in the October 14, 1974 murder of 31-year-old Ellen Holman. Toole's private life was a mystery in the years that followed. He hitched a ride in the American South and drifted back to Jacksonville in early 1975 D. Toole married a woman 25 years his senior on January 14, 1976, but their marriage didn't last long. When his wife found out he was gay, she left him 3 days later. Later on, Toole disclosed that his marriage was an attempt to conceal his actual sexual orientation. Toole was taken into custody for an unrelated arson incident in April 1983, while George Sonnenberg, 65, was inside his house. He had set it on fire. For the horrifying arson attack, Toole was taken into custody, admitted to the crime, and was sentenced to 20 years in prison. Toole, however, stated at his trial for killing George Sonnenberg that he only signed the confession to be sent back to Jacksonville and did not set the house on fire. He was given a death sentence for first-degree murder, but it was later reduced to life in prison. Toole, who was already serving a prison sentence for 2 unconnected killings, shockingly admitted to killing Adam Walsh on October 21, 1983. John Walsh, Adam's father, was convinced that Toole had committed the crime despite the lack of hard proof. According to Toole, he promised Adam candy and toys to entice him into his white 1971 Cadillac sedan DeVille, which had a noticeable dent on the right bumper. At first, Toole said Adam was quiet and cooperative as they traveled north on Interstate 95 toward Jacksonville, but as time went on, Adam started to get anxious. In a shocking development, Toole said he struck Adam in the face. He claimed that when things became more heated, he hit Adam once more, knocking him out. Toole continued north on the Florida Turnpike to an abandoned service road north of the Raid Bar Road overpass in northwest St. Lucie County while Adam was hurt. Toole used his car's seatbelt to strangle Adam to death after realizing he was still alive. He then allegedly used a hatchet to decapitate Adam after dragging his lifeless body out of the car. Toole later stated that he destroyed Adam's remains in an old refrigerator as part of his disposal process. He claimed he wanted to adopt Adam after he got back to Jacksonville, but that plan wasn't seen as feasible. The blood-stained carpet from the car, the hatchet allegedly used in the murder, and eventually the car itself were among the important pieces of evidence that police lost during the course of the investigation. This evidence loss was a major blow to the investigation. However, Toole was never formally charged or found guilty of Adam's murder because there was not enough tangible evidence. Toole initially admitted to the crime, but later recanted his admission, casting doubt on the case. In addition to depriving Adam's family of the justice they were entitled to, this lack of accountability also raised grave questions regarding the efficiency of the investigation and the handling of evidence in such dire circumstances. There are serious concerns regarding Otis Toole's possible involvement, because multiple witnesses located him in the Hollywood region in the days preceding Adam's disappearance. Toole, who was serving a life sentence for other offenses, passed away in prison in September 1996 at the age of 49 from cirrhosis after a long and difficult life. According to his niece, he confessed to Adam's murder on his deathbed after he passed away. On October 10, 1983, the television movie Adam, which told the tragic tale of Adam Walsh's kidnapping and murder, debuted. When it first aired, it attracted 38 million viewers and significantly increased public awareness of child abduction. In 1983, 1984, and 1985, each broadcast included a hotline for tips along with images and descriptions of missing children. 13 of the 55 children who were highlighted were able to recover successfully as a result of this initiative. The American rapper Bizzy Bone was reunited with his mother after a babysitter recognized his photo during the broadcast, making it a noteworthy case. The Walsh family changed the way society views missing children by using Adam to transform their tragedy into a potent advocacy tool. Additionally, in 1984, the U.S. John and Reeve Walsh, along with other parents of missing children, tirelessly lobbied Congress to pass the Missing Children's Assistance Act. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, NCEMEC, an organization devoted to offering resources, support, and advocacy for missing children and their families, was made possible by this important legislation. The act sought to strengthen the response to kidnappings of children and guarantee that law enforcement had the resources and direction required to successfully handle these tragic situations. After John Walsh's book was published, Hollywood Police Chief Rick Stone conducted a thorough review in 1997, which sparked a renewed effort to look into Adam's case. Prior to being named Hollywood's chief of police the year before, Stone had 22 years of law enforcement experience, having worked for the Dallas, Texas, and Wichita, Kansas departments. Stone carefully examined the evidence, even going back to Toole's recorded interrogations by Hollywood detective Mark Smith, even though the crime had taken place 16 years prior. After reviewing, Stone came to the conclusion that Toole had killed Adam with proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Toole and Henry Lee Lucas, his partner, had admitted to or linked themselves to over 200 murders, many of which turned out to be untrue. The majority of Lucas's confessions were actually discovered to have been forced by the police, which further calls into question the veracity of Toole's statements. After Adam Walsh's father called the America's Most Wanted hotline to voice concerns about his son's pedophilia, Jeffrey Dahmer was named as a suspect in the case in 2007. At the time of Adam's kidnapping, Dahmer had resided in Miami Beach, which is close to Hollywood. Both recognized Dahmer from pictures following his arrest, and witnesses claim to have seen a suspicious young blonde man at the Hollywood Mall on the day Adam vanished. Furthermore, just before Adam's severed head was found, a truck driver claimed to have seen a man driving a blue van close to a canal. However, police rejected his account. John Walsh voiced doubts about any link between Dahmer and the murder of his son, pointing to a dearth of evidence, even though Dahmer denied any involvement in Adam's case. Due to his 2-week absence from home in 1981 and the installation of a new seat cover in his vehicle soon after Adam's disappearance, Edward James, another suspect, sparked suspicions. Investigators cleared him after a voice stress analysis revealed no deceit. Only incomplete dental records were used to identify the child, and there was no autopsy report. Even though the Walsh family acknowledged Otis Toole's guilt, these unanswered questions cast doubt on the case's legacy. With John Walsh at his side, Hollywood Police Chief Chad Wagner declared the case closed on December 16, 2008. The police came to the conclusion that Otis Toole was the murderer following an outside review. Following Adam's tragic story, legislative efforts kept changing. On July 25, 2006, the Adam Walsh Child Protection and Safety Act was passed by President George W. Bush, who signed it into law a few days later. This historic act strengthened punishments for violent crimes against children, put policies in place to prevent human trafficking, and created a national database for convicted juvenile offenders. The Adam Walsh Reauthorization Act, which was introduced in 2016, made sure that programs established under the 2006 Act had the money they needed to continue their essential work. This law, which was a part of the Survivors' Bill of Rights, demonstrated a strong dedication to protecting children. Even though Adam Walsh's passing is a tragic chapter in American history, his narrative has sparked important change. And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments, what part of this story shocked you the most? Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. David Edward Moust, in contrast to other serial killers, was viewed as an outlier, a lunatic, who didn't match the conventional description of a ruthless, malevolent, uncontrollable killer. Rather, he was someone who truly regretted his actions and wanted to be imprisoned for the rest of his life in order to protect others. He screamed for assistance, but nobody responded. What events in his life shaped who he is now? Let's examine the tale of a man who was disappointed by his parents' separation, a difficult childhood, and an ineffective legal system. The story is about a serial killer called Deranged Dave. George and Ava Moust welcomed David Edward Moust into the world on April 5, 1954, in Connellsville, Pennsylvania. The family had 3 other children in addition to David. The Moust family had a difficult life. Ava and George both experienced challenging upbringings. The parents were unable to provide a loving home for their own children because his father was placed for adoption when he was 12 years old. George tried to avoid his wife, who needed constant attention, was emotionally unstable and self-centered, by being away from home a lot. Their mother had a nervous breakdown shortly after the birth of David's younger brother Jeffrey and spent a month in the hospital. She might have experienced postpartum depression, although at the time medicine didn't fully understand or support women with such conditions. David's parents divorced in 1963, when he was just 7 years old. David's father reportedly started the divorce because he had stopped providing for his ex-wife and the 4 kids for a year, leaving the woman to care for the family alone. Life at their parents' house was tough for all the kids, but David had it the worst, according to David's sister. Maybe because he looked so much like his father, their mother's hatred of her ex-husband was passed on to her son. Ava asserted that she was powerless over the boy. David allegedly attempted to kill his brother Jeffrey twice by the time he was 8 years old, once by pushing him into a lagoon and stepping on his fingers to prevent him from climbing out, and again by trying to burn Jeffrey's bed. Additionally, according to his mother, she frequently looked in her son's pockets to make sure he hadn't stolen anything. She said he would take her valuables and sell them, all allegedly before he was 9 years old. Ava said she no longer wanted to deal with a challenging, troublesome child when he turned 9. The 9-year-old child was admitted to a mental health facility after she went to the court and claimed she needed assistance because he was mentally ill. The doctors and staff, however, did not observe any of the behavior that Ava had described. Instead, they came to the conclusion that the mother had just left her son behind. It made the boy's already challenging life at home even more so. Numerous other patients, including those with aggressive criminal tendencies, developmental disorders, and schizophrenia, had to share common areas with him. David felt confused and angry. Given that both his mother and father had deserted him, he felt stuck and had nowhere to go. He waited by the window on visitation days, hoping to see his mother, but she never showed up. In an attempt to comfort him, the institution's staff offered explanations for his mother's absence, such as her illness or another reason. The boy eventually came to terms with his circumstances. He and the other kids just thought their parents were in need of a vacation. In part, the kids were correct, but in reality, they hadn't been abandoned, at least not in David's case. As terrible as it sounds, such institutions were used in those days to essentially leave a child there. Later, David remembered a boy who was sent to the mental institution by his parents, who treated it like a summer camp while they took their own vacations, and who spent many summers at the clinic. Their son miraculously recovered from his mental illness by the time they got back from their vacation. Doctors evaluated David's intelligence right away. He was always able to express himself clearly and showed remarkable skills, remembering sports events with vividness. As a result, the medical staff quickly came to believe that David's mother, Ava, rather than her son, was mentally ill. In order to send David home, they waited for her to recover. But each time they attempted to arrange for the child to return home, his mother turned him away. The clinic staff was forced to formally recognize David's lack of mental abnormalities when he turned 13. But he had nowhere to go yet. As a result, he was moved to a children's home a few blocks from his family's residence. His realization that his relatives lived close by but didn't want to interact with him must have been extremely upsetting. But David ended up with other boys going through adolescence in a shelter. It was only natural for them to try out relationships with one another because they were unable to engage with people of the other sex. Another boy started clamoring for David's attention as soon as he arrived at the children's home. Being extremely persistent, he threatened to tell everyone about David's stay in the mental institution, effectively blackmailing him. Despite his resistance, David would later write in his diary that he gave in and kissed the young blackmailer, feeling instantly repulsed and angry at himself. David adapted to the shelter quite well aside from this incident. Even though David Most had a rough upbringing, spent time in the clinic, and lived in a shelter, his intelligence was innate and unaffected by these experiences. He maintained his focus and dazzled everyone with his extraordinary memory. Life appeared to be getting better until all of a sudden a sense of anger arose inside of him. By the time he was 15, David had attacked Eddie, another boy. While they were playing together, David began strangling Eddie for no apparent reason. When David noticed that Eddie was practically out of breath, he abruptly stopped. Eddie granted his request for forgiveness. Was this a genuine act of repentance? It's unclear because David might have tried to control himself, had nowhere else to go, and didn't want trouble. But because he wrote about it in his 87-page prison journal, we are aware of this incident. However, David's restraint was short-lived, as he soon tried to choke Daniel, another boy. David seized a rope and wrapped it around Daniel's neck while they were in a room together, just watching TV. When he realized Daniel hadn't done him any harm, he stopped once more. "Enough," I told myself. "Leave the rope," he wrote in the diary, and Daniel fell to the ground. He was analyzing his actions and persuading himself that they were wrong. It was as if I was trapped inside myself and someone else was trying to kill Daniel, and I couldn't stop. David started to believe that he had no control over his thoughts or behavior, which was undoubtedly frightening for a teenager whose life lacked a typical parental role model. David was sent back to the institution for the mentally ill after Daniel, who lived, reported the incident. By the time the teenager turned 17, life appeared to be getting better. He made the decision to go home after he and a few other guys fled the clinic. He was devastated to learn that Ava had married and that her unwanted son had no place in her house. Furthermore, she pretended that David had never existed and told everyone that he was a shame to the family. She persuaded him to enlist in the army in order to get rid of him. It's crucial to remember that it was 1971, during the height of the Vietnam War, but maybe it wasn't the worst choice for the boy, to provide him with a purpose in life, a place to live, and practical skills. He was sent to the recruiter by his mother. After being drafted into the army, David was dispatched to Frankfurt, Germany. He worked as a cook at a military installation that also housed civilians. James McLister, a 13-year-old who everyone called Jimmy, was one of them. On the base, his parents were engineers. It was at the Army bowling alley that David and Jimmy first met. David also found another talent. He was a great bowler who competed and made a respectable living doing it. After becoming friends, David and Jimmy spent time together until one night when David woke up in his bed with Jimmy, naked. He became furious. He recommended that Jimmy take a moped ride. The boy obviously viewed him as an older brother, trusted him wholeheartedly, and complied without hesitation. If only he understood David's thoughts. David tied Jimmy to a tree and beat him with a plank he found there after they drove a long way from the base to a location where a World War II bomb crater still existed. Jimmy's killer just untied the body and left it there when Jimmy stopped breathing. David went back to the base and acted as though nothing had occurred. They looked for the boy, of course, but he was only located a month later. Despite being in custody, David managed to persuade the judge that it was a tragic mishap. The boys allegedly damaged the moped, and Jimmy crashed out of it. David hid Jimmy's body because he was afraid and unsure of what to do. He was taken seriously. David was given a 3-year prison sentence because there was no proof of murder. It's interesting to note that David behaved flawlessly while incarcerated, received a diploma, wrote to his family once a week, and learned practical new skills. He was eligible to be considered for early release on parole because of his excellent behavior, but he turned down the offer. The young man was terrified of being free as he realized what he was capable of. He had ample opportunity to think about his actions while confined, and he came to the conclusion that he would undoubtedly murder someone else if he were freed. He was repulsed by such thoughts and feelings and hated himself for them. Because he had a conscience, his lawyer subsequently referred to him as one of the most remarkable serial killers. Even up until the point at which he committed another murder, he felt bad about killing people. Because of what he had done, he detested himself, but the desire to kill came back, and he gave in and killed once more. It's a really odd behavioral pattern. However, when he turned 23 in 1977, he was set free. He made friends with a teenage boy after relocating to Chicago 2 years later. Although it appeared that they were friended, David occasionally felt the urge to stab the boy while he was staying overnight. David gave in to this overwhelming desire after they had another drink, and the teenager dozed off on the couch. He nearly disemboweled him by stabbing him in the abdomen with a knife, but the teenager lived. David was found guilty of attempting to kill someone. He was found not guilty, despite lying on the witness stand. We don't know what he said to convince them. Maybe he was also a devilishly convincing person when needed. David had not been able to learn to control his desires by the time he was 27. He remembered the kiss at the orphanage when a boy came up to him, trying to figure out what was happening to him. He hypothesized that his bad behavior stemmed from this unpleasant, intimate experience. He therefore made the decision to track down and murder that boy, who was now a man. He thought he could stop his destructive impulses and desires by doing this. He therefore embarked on a quest to target this man with his anger. But he found out that the man was incarcerated when he got to the location where the boy had lived. Therefore, David wasn't the only person who got into trouble after leaving that orphanage. He was unable to control his urge to kill or vent his anger on his offender. Then he saw a 15-year-old boy named Donald Jones going by his car. He was utterly innocent and just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Under the pretense of a straightforward odd job, David persuaded the teenager to get into the car and drove him to a remote location with quarries. Like his last victim, he stabbed Donald multiple times in the abdomen. He later described in his diary how the boy repeatedly pleaded with him not to be killed, saying, "Don't kill me, I'm only 15 years old." Nevertheless, David was powerless to stop himself. Then, unable to leave the teenager alone, he led him to the section of the quarry that was flooded. The teen died. David left the town without waiting for the body to be found. He was aware that Galveston, Texas, was where his uncle resided. David was given a job in his construction company and was permitted to live with his uncle. Once more, David demonstrated that he was a great worker, but after he unintentionally damaged the company van, his uncle fired him. The situation worsened. He offered a 14-year-old boy alcohol and illegal drugs when he invited him to his hotel room, but instead he started beating him. He stopped abruptly, as though the regular David took over and realized he had committed this terrible deed. Embarrassed, he dropped the weapon and started crying. David was given a 5-year sentence and the boy lived. He once more believed that he would carry on killing if he were released from prison. He was extradited to Chicago in 1982 in connection with the murder of Donald Jones, after investigators began linking him to the Donald case. They kept him in a mental health facility for a long time because they didn't think he was competent to stand trial. But in 1994, after waiting for a trial for 10 years, David acknowledged his guilt. He received a 35-year sentence. He was the most dangerous inmate the Illinois Department of Corrections would have, according to a report written by the Cook County prosecutor. He was even called a criminal on par with John Wayne Gacy by the sheriff. However, David Moust's sentence was lowered by 12 years because he had to wait 12 years for a trial and extradition. His remaining sentence was also reduced by 2 years due to his excellent behavior while incarcerated. In a 6-page letter to the Illinois Department of Corrections, David expressed his desire to remain incarcerated and acknowledged that he was unable to control himself. Illinois had a law at the time that permitted a convicted sexual assault offender to voluntarily serve out the rest of their life in prison. When given this choice, David wrote back, "Bring the papers, I'll sign everything," but no one approached him. His attorney claims that the letter was never even read, and he was freed from detention in 1999. Following a subsequent release, David relocated to Oak Park, Illinois. A year later, he attacked his friend Anthony by striking him on the back of the head with a metal pipe, despite his hope that a new place to live would allow him to start over. It would seem reasonable to assume that the police would deal with him more severely this time, but since Anthony was a former gang member who didn't want to involve the police and wouldn't testify against David, no charges were even filed against him. After his parole expired in 2002, David made the decision to relocate once more, this time to Hammond, Indiana. He discovered a local job that frequently involved and was frequented by teenagers. Employers were already able to investigate the backgrounds of potential hires by that point. David was just permitted to work with young boys in spite of his history of abusing teenagers. He soon fell back into his old routine, going to public pools and other places where teenagers congregated. By assigning the boys what appeared to be easy tasks, he gave them chances to make money. No teen would turn down the opportunity to make some cash by performing an apparently simple task, but these tasks turned out to be sinister. This went on until the disappearance of James Rainey, 16, and Michael Dennis, 13. That summer, David had made friends with these boys at the public pool and invited them to his house. The boys disappeared on September 10, 2003, the last time they were spotted. Given Michael and James's disobedient behavior, the police initially thought they might have simply fled. Therefore, the disappearance of Nick James, 19, on May 2, 2003, garnered more attention than the disappearance of these two boys. Nick James's family had been putting pressure on the police for months, and he wasn't rebellious. Investigators looked into his background after discovering that he shared a store with David Moust. They asked him to take a polygraph test because they had no proof, and he passed. He said he hadn't seen them in a while, which was pretty much accurate, but they didn't inquire as to whether he had murdered the boys. Investigators chose to search David's home even though he passed the polygraph exam. In 2003, the K-9-wielding officer, Emo, was on the hunt for bodies. In order to search David Moust's basement, the police invited the dog and its handler. The dog started barking at the basement's far wall when the officer gave Emo the order. The handler told investigators that although the dog had been trained to pretend to dig, this behavior was strange because the dog was acting against its training. However, there had to be a reason why the dog wouldn't leave that specific location, so it was necessary to break through the concrete and investigate what was behind it. They were asked to go back to the same house a week later. Nothing was discovered when officers dug a deep hole in the floor. They went around and drilled a longer hole, but they were unsuccessful, so they gave up. They requested that they bring the dog back. He went straight to the hole this time and lay down. Since the officer was unable to record this, he asked the handler to give the dog another command. The dog then went to another hole and lay down again. After bringing in a concrete specialist, police discovered that David had used a staggering 80 bags of concrete. This was obviously done to conceal something, most likely bodies. 3 bodies were discovered when the police finally removed the concrete. Along with Nick, David had buried James and Michael beneath the basement after suffocating them in his apartment. David's brother and mother, who hadn't spoken to him in a long time, suddenly showed up. In numerous interviews, Jeffrey questioned whether the events could have been avoided had the police taken notice of David sooner. He claimed that his brother had committed horrible things when he was younger, but he had no proof. In addition, his brother and mother, who had not spoken to David in a long time, appeared to be desperate for attention. Jeffrey even had aspirations of becoming a writer. Thomas Wayne, his lawyer, claimed that although David was a serial killer, he wasn't born that way. The lawyer genuinely thought that his childhood was the recipe for making a serial killer, if anyone was looking for it. He never learned how to interact with others or live in society. David entered a guilty plea to the killings in November 2005 and received 3 life sentences. David died in January 2006 at the age of 51. He confessed to 5 murders, including 3 in Hammond, in a note discovered in his cell. He expressed his disappointment in not receiving a death sentence because he believed he deserved it. He felt that he would not have committed as many crimes if he had been kept out of the public eye. He also didn't want his existence to be funded by taxpayers. He accepted responsibility for his actions and begged the families of the victims for forgiveness. He only blamed himself, not his parents or upbringing. David wrote that although he loved his family, they never loved him back. And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments what part of this story shocked you the most. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.